Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
Hey, Sure Bet Coffee. Put that giddy up in your cup. That giddy up in your cup. Sure Bet Coffee.
They're off in the 2023 First Crop Sires Race. Maximum Mischief makes the lead with the most 2-year-old maiden special winners by any sire. On the backstretch, Matoli and Omaha Beach close the gap with stakes performers from coast to coast. Vino Rosso finds his best and leads on the turn with 4 Grade 1 colts on dirt. But it's Matoli with his 3rd TDN Rising Star, your champion freshman, leading an impressive Spendthrift Superfecta.
Hi, everyone. I'm here today with Carrie Brogden. Thank you for joining me. This is going to be a little Q&A about breeding. It's a popular topic that people always ask about. A lot of people see the racing side of things, but I think they have a lot of questions about breeding. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so your farm is in Lexington, Kentucky, and you also do the sales as well. So I wanted to ask you, if somebody comes to you and says, Carrie, who should I breed my mare to? Where do you even begin with that question?
That is a great question. I wish more people would ask that. Our farm is actually in Bourbon County in Paris, Kentucky. We are between Claiborne and Stone Farm. We personally live downtown Lexington. I love Lexington. I wish people would say that. And the people that do say that, I say to them, okay, what does your mare physically need? If your mare is 15 hands, she doesn't need to go to some 15 one-hand stallion. So I think that it's very important to be honest about, and I will tell you the amount of people that say, my mare's perfect is a lot. And I was like, well, no. I mean, there are some that are pretty close to perfect, but I would definitely say that would be the first very important question for me to ask is, what physical traits does your mare need? And also, was she slow? Is she fast? Is she turf? Is she dirt? Is she sprinter? Is she router? So I think those are very important when assessing a mare and where to go to.
You know, you're in the heart of the bluegrass there in Kentucky, and it certainly seems that the racing and breeding industry is alive and thriving in Kentucky. You know, some of the regional markets where I've been, which have been California, Phoenix, and Washington, they're actually downsizing and they're not as many mares bred. But when you talk about the stallions in Kentucky, I know you can get a stallion anywhere from $5,000 up to $200,000. And even though you might breed to a $200,000 sire, that doesn't guarantee success, unfortunately. And we've even seen some great race mares that just didn't pan out in the breeding shed. So when you're looking at pedigree and you see the mares by a certain stallion, how do you match that up with the sire line if you're going to look at pedigree as opposed to the size and, like you said, speed or distance of the mare?
Well, there's definitely certain crosses that work. And for example, Unbridled Song with Candy Ride, Candy Ride with Not This Time, AP&D with Stormcat, Tisnow mares with Stormcat mare. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of, a lot of them though, if you think about it, a lot of them do end up being a physical cross and a pedigree cross. So like, I think the reason that Stormcat mares, for example, or Stormcat line does so well with AP&D line is because you're not doubling up on offset knees. And you're taking a stayer line of 2-turn route horses and you're breeding some speed in. So for me personally, we do not breed like to like, unless we're talking turf to turf or dirt to dirt. I do think it gets a little dodgy when people take all dirt sires and breed them to all turf mares or vice versa. But that's my own personal belief.
Yeah, I think, and another thing, you may get this question a lot, or I know that we've probably read similar articles that, you know, how horses are raised. I think that's a big thing with these babies. You know, it might have the greatest pedigree, but also, you know, when you're talking about breeding, you're talking, you know, 11 months that you have to wait for the foal to come and hit the ground. And then you have another probably 2 years before you're starting breaking and training. So I think there's a lot of the breeding that not only do you have the conceptualize and the idea on the front end, but you also have the raising of the foals. And obviously Kentucky, there's no place better.
Well, I can tell you that I have firsthand knowledge of that. So when we were in Virginia, and that's where my parents' original farm was, and my mom and dad had mares in Virginia. And then after my parents' divorce, my mom got back into it, and she had probably between 12 and 20 mares when I was in college that would shuttle back and forth to Virginia. And we, I think, produced one listed stakes winner by Circuit. That is all we had. And I'm telling you, we dealt with that blackjack soil. We dealt with club feet. We dealt with all kinds of problems. Our first crop, once I moved to Kentucky, our first crop foaled and raised here in Kentucky had premium tap in it. It was a grade 1 winner. So actually, that kind of gave me goosebumps right now. But I do think that the land, no question in my mind, the land makes a huge difference. And the reason we bought our farm is actually because it was in between Claiborne and Stone Farm for that very reason. And I don't know, people used to always come to Virginia and tell my mom, I remember when Riley McDonald from Eaton came and looked at her horses, and he was like, oh, the horses are like so far behind the Kentucky horses comparatively. They're, your horses look 3 to 4 months behind what these other Kentucky horses are. And my mom used to always get like offended, and it was a hard thing to hear because you didn't know why. I mean, if anything, we were overfeeding the horses, too much food. So fast forward all these years, I've been in Kentucky now 25 years, and there is something different. The grass is different. The land is different. It develops bone and strength and size and substance. And there is something definitely to be said. And there's obviously parts of this country, whether it's in Florida or New York, there are parts you can find anywhere. I think the common denominator would be the limestone shelf underneath. But like you said, they can't just look at the land. They have to be on the land. And there's a big article actually that just came out today, a Pollock report, how they did this study. And it's like, oh my gosh, horses raised outside have much fewer injuries as they get older. And I always tell people, when the horses are out on the land and getting concussion and walking around and big and strong and interacting with each other, you're building oak. You're building the hardest, strongest bones you can, versus if they're in a stall or raised solo or raised in 1 acre paddocks. I mean, to me, you're raising horses with pine. Now there's exceptions to every rule, and I'm sure people will be like, well, my horse was raised from here and there, but we're just talking about in general and trying to produce the racehorse. There is a reason that these Kentucky breds run all over the world very successfully. And I definitely think a lot of it has to do with the land.
So you mentioned something earlier, and this is kind of a thing I wanted to touch on, that it seems that horses don't race as long as they used to. They're not as durable. They need more time between races. And some only have a couple races and then they're done. Do you think that's breeding, or do you think that's some of the raising like we've been talking about?
Well, I think it's partially breeding and partial medication. I mean, LASIK, I'm a very strong proponent I think we should get rid of it. I think we have weakened our breed. I think that's my own personal opinion. I know there's a lot of people that don't believe me, but I don't think we should be able to I think what the Jockey Club and the Graded Stakes Committee and whoever was responsible for the horses that running in the graded stakes now cannot run on LASIKs. And I think that will change the breed, because stallions that cannot win graded stakes or get graded stakes placing, they're not going to breed the mares. So I think that's going to nip a lot of that particular part of it. Now, do we reward speed as opposed to longevity? Absolutely. And that's just, people would rather have a Saturday horse than they would a week-long horse that they run and he has 45 starts and runs out 400,000. They would rather win a Derby prep and ride that kind of wave. So the commercial market has changed a lot of things too. But ultimately, the expense of breeding and raising a horse where you have the stud feed, the care, everything, the veterinary work, the feed, the hay, etc. You can go to Keeneland September or Phasic July or Phasic Saratoga, and you can buy a horse most likely for less than it cost to raise the horse. Now, not necessarily at Saratoga, but if you want to spend $30,000 to $50,000 and buy a decent horse, you can go to the non-select sales and buy a really nice horse. And I'm telling you, to be able to try to sell a yearling for less than 50,000 and raise it in Kentucky and pay a stud fee, you're how are you going to break even at that? Especially that doesn't even take account the cost of your mare and the actual oven to produce these foals. So I think you're seeing a lot of people shift to, instead of breeding it, I mean, breeding is a little bit like Forrest Gump. It's a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And that is true. And I always say to people, you think the death and destruction is on the racetrack? It is nothing compared to foaling mares and having these little babies. And, they're fragile beings until they get hardier and older. And, get bad case of diarrhea will keep, knock it down and kill a foal in 24 hours. And it's a heartbreaking thing. So you have to, the people here that have big operations, they understand going in there. I mean, we had just recently last month, we bred Vegas Magic, who won a grade 2 for Doug O'Neill at Santa Anita, and her mother was expecting a full sibling, and unfortunately she aborted 2 months ago with a good Magic, back with a $45,000 stud fee, and now he's 125, and it was a twisted cord. But the foal went in for necropsy, and the cord was 156 centimeters long, or some outrageous anomaly. And so there's nothing anyone could do about it. But there goes the full sister or full brother to a really nice racehorse, and it's just part of life. I mean, I don't even cry anymore because I know that when you're dealing with numbers, these things are going to happen, and the breeding is not for the faint of heart.
That's for sure. On the racing side, and there's so many injuries and setbacks in racing, but you don't even realize how many small things along the way and hurdles that these babies have to overcome just to make it to the breaking farm or to the yearling sale. So yeah, I hear you there. And I definitely agree that breeding is, someone needs to come and speak with someone like you, because if you're just a novice at breeding and you've had so many years of experience, you can help them, avoid some of the mistakes, instead of breeding their mare 2 or 3 years to the wrong sire lines or the wrong conformation. And then, like you said, bad knees to bad knees. One of the questions people have asked is mares, and we talked about the Lasix, but if you have mares that are bleeders, do you recommend not breeding those fillies or mares?
Well, first of all, there's no chart that goes with a mare to say, hey, this mare's a bleeder. Yay. I mean, we recently bought a stakes mare privately, and she was a nice stakes mare. And at the end of her career, she started bleeding. So, I talked to the original trainer, and I was surprised. I said, and he was like, yeah, well, she was fine before this and fine before that. So a lot of times at least for me, the 2 fillies I have dealt with that have bled badly, when I got them home, both of them, and they came at different times with different trainers, both of them could barely hobble off the van. So I actually think a lot of the bleeding can be a secondary effect from whatever particular thing is bothering them, and it stresses that whole system. That's just from observations. But mares only can have 1 foal a year. So I think the ultimate goal, the ultimate way to not breed any genetic bleeders will be through the stallions. Because one mare with one full year through her lifetime, she'll probably have 8 to 10, maybe 12 foals. So that's not going to impact the breed. When you have a horse like, a stallion, and you breed hundreds and hundreds of mares, that's going to be much more proliferate in the thoroughbred horse population.
And do you? I know that there's some stallions that you can buy a share in. Would you recommend buying a stallion share where you'd have a season and you'd breed to the same stallion every year, or is that not a good idea?
Well, if you own a crystal ball and you break it out and you ask before you buy that share, I mean, they offered me a share and then not this time. And I told them I couldn't believe how expensive they were. They were crazy. And oops. I think his last share traded at $2 million. So I think with the share for us, but we have numbers. It's very hard if you don't have numbers to go in all in. I mean, we didn't used to buy a lot of shares. Now we do buy shares. And for example, when Dr. Shivel, who I know is raised out there in California, when he came to TaylorMade and I went and saw him, I went in there not thinking I was going to like him a lot. But then when I saw him physically, I was like, ooh, he's really fast and he's really pretty. And so there is an example of a horse that we weren't originally going to take a share on. But then when I saw him, I was like, wow, now I see physically why he was so fast. And, we've got a lot of two-turn. I mean, we like to say them classic mares, but we do with a lot of two-turn plotty mares. I mean, there are stallions too that do well with more speedier type mares. I think you see a horse like Frosted, who started his career for 50,000 and he didn't have any success. And now that he stands for less money, he's breeding those speedier mares. So my question is that because he does well breeding, like to like? He's kind of breeding those cheaper speed mares and he's offering soundness and he's having a much better run than he did in his early, more expensive crops. But none of that stuff is stuff we can really know. I mean, I may have the most beautiful mare on the planet and breed her to a gorgeous stallion like Jackie's Warrior or something like that, and she'll have a complete donkey. So over the years, you have to really get to know your mares. If you breed, say you have a share in Upstart or whatever, and you breed your mare year after year after year, and it's not a good mating, then that would be a very hard thing to deal with. And say, but the opposite could come true too. I just think ultimately you have to have numbers, and if anyone's going in there with an idea that they want to start and have a legitimate broodmare band, they should have think about having at least 10 mares. Because, something's going to lose their pregnancy. Somebody's going to have a placentitis. Somebody's going to be crooked. Somebody's going to, I think the statistics are in Kentucky, like 92% of stallions that start their career in Kentucky don't end their career in Kentucky. So a lot of things can happen in between. But stallion shares are just something we've started doing now. And that's because we have numbers.
A couple other things that come to mind are, what is your feeling on maximum amount of mares to be bred by a stallion?
I am and have been very verbal and very vocal about the book cap. I think you're seeing the ramifications of it right now. I mean, when a stallion can cover the book first year of basically 3 stallions, and then second year, he's going to cover 1/3 of that. So
what's the book count so the viewers will know how many mares?
Oh, there is no book cap. There is no. They presented one. The Jockey Club wanted to do 140, but it was kind of forced down the. It wasn't negotiated, I guess. Well, of course, I could be speaking at a turn because I'm not sure exactly what the process went. Do I think we should have a book cap? Absolutely, 150% for the health of the industry. I mean, can you imagine what Into Mischief would be standing for if he could only breed 140 to 160 mares? And it would give horses like him, when he first retired at stud, a shot. I mean, Vijak was in his first crop and he only bred 38 mares. And the reason we sent Life Happened to him is because she couldn't get into the stallion of her choice. She couldn't get, Bernstein was full that particular day. So you know, it's changed now. Now the stallions breed 3, 4, 5 times a day, and the book caps, it's just like caterpillar soccer, though. I mean, that's what the breeding industry is. Oh, this horse is hot. Oh, wait, no, he's cold. You know, and so you see horses like Sharp as Tekka who come out blazing with their first crop and then pew, and get sold off because there's nothing underneath it to support that particular stallion if they quote unquote hit. So, I mean, it's an amazing dynamic for me. I think a horse that's going to have a great year is Connect. I mean, Connect's got amazing crop of short yearlings. So nice, but he's very quiet. He's very quiet because after his first crop, he bred those lesser mares. So watch out would be my prediction. Who knows if I'm right, but when his yearlings now hit the racetrack, I think we're going to see him come alive.
What are some of the high numbers that the stallions are breeding this past season?
I think the highest this year, a Golden Pal, I think covered 292 mares or something like that.
So it's well doubled of what the old book count was.
Yeah, I would consider that triple. So, but I mean, if you have a horse that likes his job and is fertile, you know, it's just a matter of how many mares want to come per day. So I don't know. For me, I understand what people are saying. Oh, it's, you know, it's restriction of trade. This is my horse. You can't tell me what to do. And I tell everyone, well, if that was the truth, the NFL would not have salary caps. So, you know, you can't, sometimes you have to do something for the betterment of the entire industry. And in the end, because there's book caps, what's going to happen? There's going to be more stallions. There's going to be higher stud fees for the highest demand stallions. I mean, at this moment right now, any horse that stands for over 150,000 to Kentucky, you can call up and get a season 2, no matter how hot they are. And that is the truth. And that is all, to me, part of the shrinking mare population and the large book caps. And then you go in the yearling sales, and it's a pretty hard ceiling of about $1 million for a yearling. You don't have those crazy days where they were bringing 3, 4, 5. I mean, I guess the yearling sales topper this year was $3 million, but that was a Rapoli horse that normally would not come on the market. So it's so many dynamics and you know, and then when the horses don't book full, the stallion managers all have to get creative. What can we do? What kind of incentives can we do? You know, the Justify no guarantee deal they tried to do. That was all, you know, part of the incentive to, hey, we have this superstar stallion. If you book your mares to some of these other stallions that are on the bubble or whatever, you'll get a chance of breeding for free to the superstar stallion. I totally understand it. I guess they ran into legal problems with it, but that was all part of trying to support their second and third and fourth year stallions.
And another question that comes up a lot is nicking. What do you think about nicking?
I think it's the biggest fraud perpetuated on this industry that I laughed, because this Saturday, if you looked at all the graded stakes, every single one, I actually even screenshotted, every single one was a B or C nick. And people call me and I'm like, if your nick doesn't treat a mare like the Dam of American Pharaohs by Yankee Gentleman, if you have a Yankee Gentleman mare and you think she's equivalent to the Dam of American Pharaoh, there's a problem. So to me, my whole family is, sorry.
I remember Bob Baffert saying, maybe it was this horse. He goes, not bad for a D nick after he won a grade 1 at Del Mar.
Well, I mean, I think the year that Stern Bound was a D. Zenyatta was a C. All the 3 top fillies that year were all Rachel Alexander, DCF. Teppan was a C, Nick. And I don't believe in it at all. I think there'd have to be thousands of crosses for it to be statistically relevant. And if your pool is as big, if your pool of Nicks or whatever is as big as a main special weight field in Gulfstream Park, all it takes is 2 cases of nocardia placentitis to wipe that out. So I do not believe in it. I have only been asked a nicking on a yearling once in my entire life. And all I can tell you is the big, beautiful, athletic horses with D nicks do great. The little rat, nothing, junk horses with A++ don't. So I don't understand that whole philosophy. But there's people that do. So that's just, once again, that's my personal, never to be not shared opinion.
And that's fine. That's great. And the other thing that we're talking about breeding, but I think breeding also takes us in those young ages, weanlings and yearlings. And I know you do the sales. And I know I've read many times where you have said that, some people are so strong on the x-rays and they'll throw out horses for minor little things and they just want perfect x-rays. And I know that in the past, I've seen horses that are winning graded stakes or a maiden special really well. And when they go to vet check them, they find all kinds of things, but they're very good on the track.
Well, I think if you ask any of the main, whether it's Alaire Ryan or Mark Taylor or myself or Pat Costello or any of the main people, the yearling, now I'm not talking about training x-rays. Training x-rays are different. Those are more traumatic. They're related to training x-rays. For all of our farm and all the graded stakes horses we've ever had off of it, the yearling vetting is, in my personal opinion, completely irrelevant. Even with, we had a filly named Assertive Style. She had a little tear in her suspensory as a yearling because of sesamoiditis. We gave her the time, and she's a graded stakes filly that we raced. So there's all kinds of ways to manage certain things, but I mean, there's so many horses that I was told it'll never this, it'll never that. And I'm like, So, and just like there's going to be a difference if your horse is like Brett Favre with the heart of a champion, or if your horse is a chicken crap and it winces from pain when you try to pull its mane. So I think there's a lot of difference in pain tolerance. And then I think if you find something clinical before the x-rays, that's when it's a problem. Like if I look at a horse and I'm like, look at all that fluid on that big boggy stifle. To me, that is not a good prognosis for racing, truly for racing. And I've had several of them. If my vet is in the barn and we're doing sales x-rays and we're x-raying a stifle and he goes, and I'm like, what? In my experience, the prognosis is good for racing because the horse has never shown any clinical signs. And that's why in my personal consignment, I always tell people, feel free to ask me. If I know, I'll tell you my own homebreds. Like I only know the horses I've been around. I mean, I know the horses that make noise in the pool, but they scope perfectly. And we've had plenty of those. And I've tracked them. And there's only one maiden special weight winner from the whole group. And I actually said that one time at a CBA event. So now I've had people ask me. So, but we definitely had that kind of scenario too. So the clinical nature of vetting versus I think is the most important thing. But a buyer buying at a yearling sale really wouldn't have that ability. So they would have to rely on their vet. I guess the biggest thing with vetting, I just encourage people to say is the horse, the strange thing we have with the sales is people be like, oh, this horse is worth this horse is worth 500,000. Oh, but he has sesamoiditis. He has a knee spur. He has this, he's that. So now he's worth 0. Well, he's not worth 0. And why? You're discounting. And so, if I have a horse that I'm selling, I know is going to get failed by the vets, I will kind of treat it that way and say, well, this horse would go, I've heard it a million times. "Oh, if your horse had passed the vet, I would have bought it." And I said, "If the horse passed the vet, what your budget was would be his opening bid." So it's one of those things where you want to try to work with your buyer, be like risk versus reward. Okay, yes, you can buy this nice quote unquote non-vetting horse for 40,000, and he would have brought 400,000, and all your risk is you've already paid for all of your training bills for the rest of his career just by taking that discount and taking that shot. So I definitely think that that's a way that I've learned that I think we're a lot of the sales people are trying to, because we've all dealt with so many that don't pass the vet but run. I think we're trying to do more of that now, where you're buying in a built-in discount for the horse, even though it's an amazing athlete.
Yeah, that's great. The another thing that comes up a lot is do you buy into or do when they do surgeries to try and correct the legs? Obviously, shoeing, they try to correct the legs. What are some of your thoughts on corrective when they're youngsters?
Well, as weanlings, if you have a horse that's pigeon-toed and you do not do screws in the foal's ankles, as by the time they're 60 days old, it will not. Most of them will, if they're severe, it will ruin their race career. I mean, so we do have to do screws in the weanlings that are like that. We try to avoid it. I hate it. I hate doing it. But if you don't, I mean, you'll basically have something that completely is pigeon-toed, and the chance of it holding up on its knees and everything if it loads its feet like that. So we do a very, very small part. I do fill out the questionnaires, and I always mark out the questionnaires if they've had screws in their ankles as foals off our farm. As far as knees in a yearling, we try not to do it. Honestly, if I have a horse that I feel like is going to need a screw as a yearling in a knee, I like to try to sell them off and let somebody else work on that. So last year we had 82 yearlings off our farm, and I did screws in 0. The year before, we did screws and knees on 2. So it's something I really, really, really try to avoid, because I don't want to screw up the natural motion of the racing of the horse and how he lands. I do think that that's much more affected by the knees than it is in the ankles of a new foal.
That's what a couple of the things when I would go to the sales. One is I always like buying off of honest people. And if they would tell you, hey, A, B, or C about the horse, like whether it's personality, what it had, why it has that scar on that hind leg, if it, you just know that, I really appreciate the honesty from sellers. And maybe they just consigned the horse and they didn't know, but if they got the info from the breeder or the owner and said, hey, this horse got hung up, he got cast in a fence when he was a baby, he's scarring there, but it doesn't bother him. And I've never counted minor scarring against horses. So, and I really like buying off people that you can trust. The second thing is, whenever I see horses a little toed out or a little offset at the knees, by the time I see them at a yearling sale, I'm thinking they've had a year and a half running around like that. So they have become accustomed to, like you said, loading all their weight on that. So at least they've had some of that. And again, if you know where the horse was raised, like some horses might not be as sales prepped and look as good, but they're strong, raw bones that look healthy and strong. And that sometimes is nicer than just the shiny penny that looks so fine bone, like, one work too fast and it's going to be, problems. And the other thing is, do you think, you mentioned this earlier about breeding too much for speed, too much for the 2-year-old in training sales? Do you think that is hurting our game?
Well, our personal philosophy is I'm trying to breed a horse that can win the Kentucky Derby. I personally don't want to breed plotters. So the only way to breed a horse with some speed, I feel like it's important to have speed either from your mare or from your stallion. So for me personally, now there are people that believe in breeding stayers to stayers and sprinters to sprinters. I personally am not. We basically, I think the best racehorses are milers. So we're trying to breed. I mean, to me, authentic, for example, he really is not bred to go in a mile and a quarter, but he was so fast and so efficient and such a tremendous racehorse and athlete that he could carry his speed. And I think that that is ultimately what I personally shoot for. There are people that don't feel this way, though. There are successful breeders out there that will breed sprinters to sprinters. And I know, like in Florida, you'll have a lot more people wanting to breed for speed down there from what I see. And then if you go over to Charlestown, for example, if you're a West Virginia breeder, there's no point in you breeding 2-turn dirt horses or 2-turn turf horses if you're trying to become the West Virginia Breeder of the Year at Charlestown. You need to breed kind of for that cheaper speed. So it can often depend on what the end goal is. For me, the end goal is to breed a Derby winner, which is so funny because we bred like all these turf fillies, which is hysterical to me. And the closest we've ever gotten to breeding a Derby winner is 7th. It is hard to win the Derby, but that is my number one bucket list, is to breed a Derby winner.
I know you'll do it before it's done, because every time I look up at the TV and the announcer says bred by Machmer Hall, so I'm always rooting for you. And one thing that I have the pleasure of seeing out at Santa Anita is, Bob Baffert. He's got these oftentimes sales toppers that were the fastest breeze horses at some of the sales. And and like you said, those milers, especially like horses that are on the lead milers, not closers, because oftentimes they don't have the speed that we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. But and a lot of, Bob coming from that quarter horse background, but so they get into the race early and then their stamina carries them. But what I have noticed about a lot of those horses, and probably why I think they sell so well, one is they work fast, but they all look so effortless doing it. Mm-hmm. Like I remember some of the 2-year-old in training sales, when you look up and a horse goes 10 flat, but they look like, man, that should have been a 10 and 4 or an 11, because it just was, they were doing it so easy. And not only that, but it's not like when they're all out to go 10 flat, but then they don't gallop out. It's like the dragster where the parachute comes out. Sure. I like a horse that hits the wire and just keeps on going. And it's like, boy, that horse was just getting started. So if you have the breeding and you have that effortless movement, and that's what I see with a lot of those really good horses at Santa Anita, is they're just effortless over the track. They're so athletic. They cover the ground. It's ease of motion. And so I know you're going to breed.
And they land. They're easy on themselves. They land light on their feet. They land. They're not bang, bang. I mean, rare is that rare is that you see a successful racehorse with the action of skip away. I mean, he was definitely the exception to the rule. So yeah, my daughter, it's funny. My daughter does jumpers, and I go and watch these warm bloods compete, and it's like, but I mean, they are like blam, blam. I mean, the up and down motion is astonishing to me, of these humongous jumpers, and they're jumping these giant fences. And I asked my sister, I'm like, they have straight shoulders, no hips. And she's like, well, the reason the warm bloods are like that is because as thoroughbreds, you have this beautiful laid back, and you want that big reach and pull motion and that efficient action. So with the warm bloods, they want it the up and down, but they have up and down shoulders because they want them to go, that's the angle, up and down, but they have the bone. So I think that's why, efficiency of action is very, very, very important. And the 2-year-old sales, I would say you'd be much better having a 10 and 2 breeze with a monster gallop out than a 9 and 4 breeze where you die in the vine. I mean, the difference is, we're not running 3 furlong races, so the market in the 2-year-old sales world has become very, very sophisticated. And I remember when the frosted colt, I was in the stands when the frosted colt of Bob's, that's now 2 for 2, was in the stands. And when he breezed, it was like, I mean, you could hear an audible gasp in the stands. And that happens several times when there's some really nice horse that just comes through and and they bring the money, but then as long as they make it to the races and don't have hiccups, seems like a lot of them show up.
Yeah, and I think that, when, especially I would say good horsemen, a lot of times it doesn't matter the sire or the mare, what they produce, once they show that ability. So I think that's where the 2-year-old sales are a little different than the yearling. The yearlings,
Oh, no doubt.
the physical and the walk and the pedigree. And then once you get to those 2-year-old sales, it's all about their athleticism. And at that point, they don't ask, who's your daddy?
Yeah.
So,
well, it's a performance. It's a completely opposite of yearling. It's a performance-based sale, but that's also why you can also, like, a lot of times we'll bypass the yearling sales with a horse with a little sesamoiditis or a little this, where we feel like they're athletic, but they're going to get scrutinized. Once you go to the 2-year-old sales, if they're proved they're sound and they come out of that race in good order, the breeze in good order, people pay attention. And yeah, it has become a very, very, very sophisticated market.
I know the pinhookers in the yearling sales, they know they have to go through all that training and sell them fairly quickly. So they, in my opinion, they want as clean as X-rays as possible, because they're going to have to resell it to the next person. And like you said,
kind of though, the problem is you're going to pay for the right physical and the right sire power. You're going to pay up the yik-yak for what you just described. So the pinhookers have to compromise somewhere. They can't go toe-to-toe and outbid these end users on the yearlings. So
there'll be no profit there for them.
Yeah. So you'll see, I think Grassroots, Dave McCathan and Jody, I think they've done a tremendous job at finding value of buying imperfect horses. So it just depends on the different 2-year-old consignor. And these consignors, the big guns like Eddie and Kieran and the Demericks and everything, they've built a reputation coming back for repeat clients. They're not going to sell somebody some limping lame horse as soon as, whatever. So it's a very different world, a very sophisticated market. And in the end, it's great because there's no way in the heck you could sell a frosted horse. What did he bring? 900,000. You can sell a yearling. He was a $50,000 yearling, but that's the dream. That's the major home run. And now he's running to his looks and his performance, which is just, that's what we all hope to do when we sell a horse to somebody, that ultimately they perform.
And it's nice as the breeder, I would think, as the horse, you raise them, they go to the yearling sale, they get sold well, then they go to the next step, whether it be the 2-year-old sale or the trainer, and it does well. So it's just like, it's got to be gratifying to breed one, and everybody along the way has had success, either in sales or in the races. So, yeah.
And sometimes that happens, and sometimes it doesn't happen. Baffert's one of his, the Malibu Moon filly it's a graded stakes winner now, just ran 3rd on Saturday. We bought her as a weanling for $67,000. She had an offset knee, which comes along with Malibu Moon.
Okay.
So I was like, my farrier's like, she's offset. She walked the road fine. That's just her. She has an offset knee. So when we got to the yearling sale, she was in book 5 and she still had that offset knee, and we'd had a great year, and she ended up selling for $20,000. Well, fast forward to the yearling sale, she worked awesome. She still had the offset knee, but Donato bought her for $190,000. She blitzed them, then she won a graded stake, and the rest is history. And I had people call me, why did you take a loss? Why did you take a loss? And I'm like, well, she had an offset knee, but obviously it doesn't bother her. And so that's a case where we lost our shirt, but I'm still thrilled for the people that came to our program, that bought a filly, and that got rewarded. I'm thrilled for the 2-year-old consignor. I'm thrilled for the owners, for, the agent advisor and the trainer. So it doesn't always work out, and there's plenty of times it doesn't, but ultimately I love cheering for people's success and hope that they will come back if they do have success. I hate it when horses get hurt. I hate it. Somebody was telling me they bought a really nice weanling off us for $40,000, and they were getting ready to make this biggest home run of all time last year. And unfortunately, she went in for colic surgery and didn't come out of it well. And they ended up basically giving her away. And so I don't want people to do that. I want people to have success off us. And sometimes it happens awesome and sometimes it doesn't, but that's the nature of the sport. It's hard. It's hard to win races. It's, I think that's why a lot of very successful business people get involved, because you can't put a box around it, but the fastest horse wins. The horse, excuse me, maybe not the fastest, but the horse that's crossing the finish line first is the winner. And that's the greatest thing about the thoroughbreds. Yeah.
Well, Carrie, it's been great spending time with you. I think the viewers will get a good education from this. And really, if they want to reach out to you, what's the best way to touch base with you?
Oh, sure. Well, they can always call me. My cell phone is 859-983-1109. I'm also very active on Facebook, Carrie Wilworth Brogden. And or come up and say hello and introduce yourself at the sales. And keep in mind, too, this is just my way. There are many different ways to the same ends. There are people that have success nicking. There are people that have success, breeding all exclusively to turf horses, so that's the whole thing is that there's many different ways to the same ends. And then if you're breeding or anything you're doing, whether it's breeding, racing, or training or whatever, management makes you and management breaks you. And you have to make sure you have you have to have the right people manage your horses.
Yeah. And I think that, earlier in the show, you really, showed that there's so much to this, and you can't, you just take your mare and get bred and hope for the best. But there are a lot of things that you could help guide people in the right way. So I hope people will reach out to you. I know you've been a longtime friend of mine. So, and it's one of those things.
24 years now?
It's one of those things where the type of people where you don't talk to them for 2 or 3 years. The phone calls like you talked to them last week. So yeah,
100%.
Well, really appreciate it, hanging out, spending time, and I'll be seeing you soon.
All right, thanks again, Jeff. I appreciate it very much. Take care.
Thank you.
The Sure Bet Coffee Play of the Day, which is actually in race 8. I like number 1, Francisco Clemente, who I believe should have won last time out in California. Was on the inside, swung very wide, finished very well, was probably best that day, but I think we see an even better race from him today.
Down the center, Francesco Clemente. He's trying to shift in, but he's shifting gears. And here he comes now. Francesco Clemente, front and center, and going away to win the McKnight.
We're going to see a very special filly in Warm Heart, who is just nothing but talent. I don't believe, in my opinion, Shug's horse that a lot of people are high on has the seasoning to handle her at this particular point, although he may go on and be a really good horse. Today is today, and the future's the future.
Here's Warm Heart. She got through at the rail. What a ride, and Warm Heart has hit the front. The globe-trotting Warm Heart is clear. Outside, I'm very busy, charging hard late. Warm Heart wins the Pegasus World Cup turn.
If there was ever a race, in my opinion, that pace makes the race, this year it's the Pegasus World Cup. Senior Buscador is a horse that I think can definitely slip into the triples, superfectas, maybe even the exacta. And if something crazy happens and we get a pace meltdown, I think Junior Alvarado is an underrated, very strong finisher. And I think that horse can definitely surprise people and make some noise late.
They come past the 8th pole. On the inside, it's still National Treasure holding on. Down the center, Senor Buscadori's running out of time. National Treasure would not be denied.
Dan Oman here with some exciting news. DRF Formulator, the gold standard in past performance information, is now free, exclusively on DRF Bets. Join DRF Bets with the promo code WINNING, get a $250 first deposit match bonus, a $10 free bet, and free Formulator already uploaded to your account. Access Formulator's premium features, including sortable trainer stats, race replays, personalized trip notes, and lots more. Free Formulator, exclusively on DRF Bets.
Tracking trips with Pick 6 King John Stetton. It's one of the best tools in horse racing for any level of player. It's your second set of eyes, spotting troubled trips, betting angles, track trends, horses to watch and favorites to fade, 10 figs, ticket structure, and more. At Tracking Trips, you're a friend with benefits. Not a member? You must hate winning money. Join Tracking Trips now. Visit pastthewire.com and we'll see you in the winner's circle. Remember, nobody does it better.
Does it better.